amidst a background of happiness that at least things are going better in the US, but a lot of places around the world are really struggling. And still a lot of communities within the US are being disproportionately hit hard as well by COVID. So the first thing I'm going to look at is to zoom in Texas communities that are predominantly Hispanic and have a look at some of those statistics reported by a virologist who's been working for a long time in the field and helped pioneer some of the mRNA vaccine technology that's being used today to save the lives of millions of Americans. So today, Texas apparently passed 50,000 deaths from COVID-19, 50,000 mums and dads, brothers and sisters, our low-income neighborhoods especially. So Professor Peter Hotez uses the phrase historic decimation. So Hispanic communities in South Texas and West Texas, and Black and brown communities in metropolitan areas. So he puts up a graph of the 50,000 deaths, and Professor Hotez had previously forecast that there would be a Hispanic decimation. So the sex of people who've died from COVID is predominantly male, 58% versus 41.9% female. And the race and ethnicity of those who have died, 46.5% Hispanic, that's a plurality, 40% white and 10% Black and 2.1% Asian. So it's really sad and indicates some of the material outcomes of racism. If those people who support Trump, who still support Trump, who have hardening reluctance to get a vaccine because of all of the white supremacist media channels they subscribe to and become informed by, those people are less willing to do anything to protect communities. And whether they consciously or unconsciously know it, the outcomes of their negligence, the outcomes of their intransigent reluctance to participate in public health measures is an increase of death amongst people in low-income communities, people who are compelled to still go to work in essential jobs, people who don't have the liberty to perform a white-collar job via the safety of the internet from their home, people who have to turn up in front-facing positions each day and cope with the consequences of people who are too misanthropic and too brainwashed to put on a mask to safeguard others. People who are too brainwashed to refrain from doing things like attending churches, restaurants, bars, anywhere where there's indoor congregation and inadequate ventilation, because COVID is spread via airborne transmission. Super spreaders can add to the potency of that transmission pattern, those transmission patterns, and it's not a one-for-one correspondence with you act badly, you wear those consequences. You act badly, you betray your community, and other more vulnerable people are more likely than you to suffer. So all of that rubbish about karma or social Darwinism to say, well, the Darwin Award's coming for those people who don't wear masks, that's absolutely failing to miss the point that people who don't wear masks are just, if they're working around other people who do wear masks, they're still protected. They're not exposed to an onslaught of person after person failing to wear masks. They're just going about their own life. But the risks are then concentrated in the lives of the most economically vulnerable and the people with the most impoverished access to healthcare. So they are participating in a willful, negligent oppression, damage to the health and safety and well-being of people in low-income communities and people in Hispanic communities. Marsha's here and says hello, Dav. Thank you, Marsha. So lovely to see you. Thanks for tuning in, as always. So that's Texas, that milestone of 50,000 deaths, that a plurality of those deaths, which is a disproportionate amount of Hispanic deaths relative to the proportion of Texas communities that are composed of Hispanic people. So there is disproportionate harm being meted out to people of Hispanic background. And this may be the biggest single tragedy in Texas history because apparently, yes, 50,000 deaths from COVID-19, 22,000 Texans died in World War II. And Professor Hotez uses the language here of Texans sacrificed their lives. I'll take a detour for a second and disagree with that. You don't go to war saying, I intend to lay down my life. You go to fight for your country, whether voluntarily, whether conscripted or voluntarily, but you don't anticipate your own death. You know it's a probability. You accept the possibility of death. You do not transactionally hand over your life for your country. And I just think it's important to draw that distinction so that Americans are not harmed by an overly high degree of acceptance of people dying, as long as we can rationalize, oh, they chose to do that. They sacrificed their lives. So if we eradicate that linguistic habit, we can increase safety because we can increase public opposition to things that endanger others instead of having an overly indulgent acceptance of, oh, well, people, healthcare workers, they sacrificed their lives. In the case of COVID, they most certainly have not sacrificed their lives on purpose, with intention. They have committed themselves to the healthcare of others for appropriate financial recompense, hopefully, and they accept a degree of risk, but that extraordinarily amplified degree of risk caused by the negligence, the criminal negligence of leaders such as Trump and Republican governors, certain Republican governors such as Abbott, DeSantis, Kristi Noem, etc. That has so greatly amplified the risk of healthcare workers dying or contracting long COVID and the attendant disabilities of that, that they are having their lives sacrificed for them by the most selfish leaders and members of the American public. So that was just a detour after referencing 22,000 Texans died in World War II. 6,000 to 12,000 Texan lives were lost in the Galveston flood, 5,000 lives lost in World War I, 3,000, in Texas specifically, 3,417 Texan lives lost in the Vietnam War, 3,000 potential Texan lives lost in the Civil War, but some say higher, 1,723 Texan lives lost in the Korean War, 700 lives lost in the Texas Revolution. What's that? Is that when Texas used to be part of Mexico and America went to war and acquired and colonized that part of Mexico? I'll have to look it up. And 600 lives were lost in Texas City in 1947. So yes, that is a very significant loss of life in Texas, and shows that you can't just expect that facts influence people. The facts of those high numbers of Texan deaths don't magically change the mind, don't magically reverse course for all of the stubborn Trump loyalists in Texas who refuse to participate in mitigation measures, public safety measures against COVID-19 to promote safety, to reduce viral transmission, like mask wearing, social distancing, temporarily refraining from attending bars, churches, restaurants, etc., until local transmission is reduced towards zero, which is a safe goal, a goal that many countries have pursued with significant success. I'm thinking about Israel, that has had 0 deaths from COVID yesterday and had I think, less than 100 COVID cases because their program of maintaining public health safety measures whilst rapidly pursuing mass vaccination has really worked out for them. And I found out that even though a lot of Orthodox Jews in Israel were not watching the news and were receiving news from these apparent phone lines that you call to get your news from, Orthodox Jewish news services that you call, and they were propagating COVID disinformation and vaccine, anti-vax propaganda. But that one pregnant woman, pregnant with her 5th child, died of COVID, and her family were very active in dispelling myths publicly. They said, nope, she didn't die after being vaccinated. She wasn't vaccinated yet. She was pregnant and she had avoided it. But if she had been vaccinated, she would be alive now, and her 4 children would not be motherless, being raised by her grief-stricken widow. So kudos to that man, because his willingness to go public and to help, and he's Orthodox Jewish, and his engagement with the public, with media, to spread that message of look at our loss, and what are you going to believe? The people who keep self-importantly lying to you because they just have oppositional defiance disorder, and whatever authorities say, they like to pretend that there's this secret underground of truth that only they have access to, and you can participate in that and be grateful to them. You know, all of these conspiracy relationships that you can get stuck into and derive meaning and importance from, just from always contradicting what you hear from doctors and scientists and people in power. Someone else notes that in Texas, exacerbating the distress of all of these COVID-related deaths is the xenophobia and scapegoating of desperate children at the border, which is now further stoked by Paxton's lawsuit. Oh, Paxton is the indicted Attorney General of Texas, Ken Paxton. When adults throughout Texas are fueling outbreaks with their refusal to wear face masks and get vaccinated when it's available to them at no cost. So yes, racism plays a significant role. Marsha says that's an amazing show of courage in the Hasidic community. Yes, it's a very good example of someone taking their loss and turning it into service-oriented purpose, service-oriented purposiveness. Bob is here. Hello, Bob. Molly is here. Hello. Bob notes that it's 46% Black and 20% Hispanic in Bedford-Stuyvesant. Listening to public radio in New York City is doing okay with the vaccine, except for Bedford-Stuyvesant in Brooklyn, only 1 in 5 has been vaccinated. All right, so that's disproportionately Black, according to the statistics you're recounting. So yes, they might need some celebrities to zoom in on that community and help share with them the details on the vaccine safety. Republicans who have opposed getting vaccinated have apparently been telling pollsters that they are more receptive to the vaccine when it's recommended to them by doctors that they know at a local level, because they are just opposed to anything promoted by the government. So I'm just going to have a little look at this Washington Post article on that. How many Republicans still don't want to get the vaccine? So more than half of US adults have received at least 1 dose of the vaccine, but more than 40% of Republicans have consistently told pollsters they're not planning to be vaccinated, a group that could threaten efforts to tamp down the virus's spread, public health officials fear. Many vaccine-hesitant Americans are increasingly entrenched in their decisions to resist the shots, says Frank Luntz, a longtime GOP communications expert who convened a focus group on Sunday over Zoom. The further we go into the vaccination process, the more passionate the hesitancy is, said Luntz after the session. If you've refused to take the vaccine this long, it's going to be hard to switch. Yep, and I'm looking at Washington Post leading articles. The US has seen a significant drop in vaccinations over the past week. And also burnt out by the pandemic, 3 in 10 healthcare workers consider leaving the profession. So that's really important. I wish there would be more stories told to interview why that is the case with healthcare workers, because I imagine Republicans will be force-fed bullshit by Tucker Carlson, who'll say, oh, they're leaving the profession because they don't want to get the vaccine. Lies have the element of surprise because they can depart from reality in any direction they choose. They're like a queen on a chessboard. And to defeat the queen with that freedom of movement from being completely untethered from reality, the ability to say whatever you want, to cater to people's emotions and prejudices, what they have an appetite to hear rather than just what needs to be said. I guess the pawns and all the other pieces have to gang up to defeat an opponent's queen. It's like everybody's got some figures on the chessboard right now, and the Republicans have this multi-directional moving queen. Maybe I'll call Trump the queen. He's been removed from the board, and I'll call Tucker Carlson the bishop because he can move diagonally, whereas pawns can only move one space at a time. Someone called Tammy from Virginia said, I was 0 on the vaccine. I'm still a 0. The doctor repeatedly tried to calm the Zoom attendees' fears, which included questions about the vaccine's long-term effects and baseless claims suggesting that the shots would change recipients' DNA. It's hard to combat that language, or the inadequacy of that language, to say, oh, they said without evidence. And to some people, they just hear that as, oh, well, the evidence hasn't been found yet. But baseless is at least an adjective that exercises a bit of power in that context. I'd love it if there's more ways in which we could powerfully dismiss bullshit. Say, completely unsubstantiated claims. That's a bit stronger. Write it down. It's a bit wordy, isn't it? Completely unsubstantiated claims. Exploitative lies. No, still too much. Too many syllables. I liked exploitative because it tells a bit of the story in that people who spread these lies are often doing so for clout. Oh, Craig Rockwell's here and he says, hi, Dav. Hello, Craig. Nice to see you. Marsha notes that the COVID situation in India is not only tragic, but should be a warning for the rest of the world. Indeed. They've run out of oxygen in hospitals in New Delhi. I think that might be the most populous city in India. But in any case, it's out of all the Indian hospitals, that should have the hospital that's most well-equipped and best supported in a funding sense, and they have run out of oxygen. So all the people that are infected with COVID in that city are going to basically not get the help that they need, and COVID is now a death sentence for them. Phil notes that George W. Bush and John Boehner couldn't do the right thing and vote for a moderate Democrat, illustrating how far we have to go. Yes, I read that George W. Bush couldn't bring himself to vote for Biden, even though he knew how necessary it was. So he wrote in Condoleezza Rice's name instead of voting for Trump or Biden. George Bush helped push for Kavanaugh to happen. I think he took Susan Collins out to lunch. So there's a lot of long-term complicity in the Republican Party to hide Republican misdeeds and hide potential perversions of the democratic election system in the US. So George W. Bush is not a hero by any means, even though when Trump was in power, we did desperately look to Republicans, never Trump Republicans, or at least Trump-averse Republicans, slightly Trump-averse Republicans. We were looking for a hero, and we intuitively knew that to change the conversation, the human psyche pays most attention to outliers, meaning surprising people. It's not surprising that many Democrats opposed a Republican president, even though the degree of vehemence with which we opposed him was a function of how notoriously awful, murderous, negligent, self-serving, and criminal his behavior was. Hi, sweetie. How you going? I heard that Daddy just made you a whole heap of bacon. Do you need a piece of bread as well? Because that sounds like quite salty, and you probably need some water. And
The water pot.
Just a water pot? You can drink some of my water if you want. Bob says Susan Collins is always out to lunch. Phil notes that India has a new COVID variant with a double mutation. All those double mutations, I know from studying a little bit about cancer when I was at university, that those variations are not merely additive. Mutations can be compounding in terms of potential harm. Bob notes, do you think that Republican people would say they didn't get the vaccine in polls but actually did? Nope. I would say that there's a lot of Republicans who are genuinely all in with adopting what they think is loyalty to Trump activity. And they think it's loyal to Trump to not get the vaccine. They intuitively sense that opposing public health is going to be an act of sabotage against the economy, and so against the president ostensibly in charge of the economy, Joe Biden, and Kamala Harris in the Biden-Harris administration. And I've got to keep saying Biden-Harris administration more, because that is something special about Joe Biden, which is he routinely foregrounds Kamala Harris. She spoke before him in the response to the George Floyd verdict, the Derek Chauvin verdict of guilty on all three counts. And he understands the importance of his partner in the executive branch of government in the US. Yes, so I'm just going to bring up some info about India. But yes, what happens in India is a stark reminder, says this reporter, to anyone who still claims that large, uncontrolled COVID epidemics would have been anything other than a catastrophe.
Hello. Thank you.
I was going to find something about COVID, but I can't see it right now. All right. Oh, I found it. Okay. This is from India about the absence of oxygen in some hospital systems now.
A hospital and medical research center in Delhi that the oxygen meter is reading 0. The oxygen meter at the hospital, at Batra Hospital in Delhi, is reading 0. This means Batra Hospital in Delhi has currently run out of medical oxygen. All right, we are going to try and dial in a doctor from Batra Hospital to get a better sense of what really is happening. But it is an alarming situation. And what we're also reporting, however, and it's important to note that, is that after SOS calls are made, after this issue is highlighted, even at the Mulchand hospital, the nodal officer did get in touch with Mulchand, and they did say that oxygen supply will be restored. But let's get in an update from what's happening at the Batra hospital. Dr. Bankata joins us, the executive director of Batra hospital. Doctor, what's happening?
Our oxygen supply is over. There's no oxygen left in the tank at all.
And how many patients do you have on oxygen support? Have you been in touch with the authorities?
And right now we are only able to provide some oxygen to the patients in the ICU. We've had to disconnect the oxygen to the other patients who are not in the ICU. So there are around 33 patients in the ICU to whom we are trying to supply oxygen. And we are not able to source any oxygen from anywhere.
What are the authorities telling you, Dr. Bankata? Have you spoken with anyone?
The authorities have been very helpful. The Delhi authorities, especially the nodal officers, Dr. Rahul Rathore and Mr. Vijay Biduri, but they have also expressed their complete inability to supply us any oxygen as of now. And I believe the same situation is at every hospital. Every hospital is running out.
So every hospital is running out of
and we have
oxygen.
Run out.
That's really...
Well, this is an SOS call, Dr. Bankata, that you're putting us...
oh, whoops, I missed a little bit more.
Putting out at the moment. What happens? You've run out of oxygen. You're saying you have 33 ICU patients.
We've been trying for the past 5 days, and we are getting oxygen for 3 hours, 4 hours, our regular supply from Inox. We really don't know where that is diverted, who is using that, who is not letting it come to us. They do not even answer our calls. The only people who have been helping us all through this have been the government officials from the government of Delhi.
So essentially, a large part of the situation is attributable to the leader of India, Modi, who is India's Trump. Face it. And I just said face it, which sounds quite didactic. I mean, let's face it. They have a Trump of their own. Trump and Modi actually got along quite well. But Modi amplifies divisions along the lines of religion and appeals to people through the moral clarity of nationalism. Instead of white nationalism, it's Hindu nationalism, showing that at least it's not an innate feature of whiteness. There's just various historical streams and forces that have riven people apart, people who could work together, but instead you have leaders who coast on the power that they've gained by validating certain identities and encouraging the scapegoating and demonization of the other communities. Craig says, Dav, I'm the only person watching you on Twitter. I wonder why that is. Is it because I don't give warning on Twitter that I'm about to broadcast? So I can't really see who's watching me at the present, but I can see 82 people have tuned in at some point. So HAPS shows me a running total. So at least 82 looks like a respectable number, even if only one person's watching currently on Twitter. There's also Periscope and there's also HAPS and YouTube. I will note that Sean popped in, is here and said, hello, husband. And I guess that's because you could hear my husband. Could you hear his voice, or could you hear me describing how he made bacon for my daughter? New York Times has an article called Least Vaccinated US Counties. Marsha gets HAPS alerts a little bit after you've started, so maybe I should spend a little bit more time at the beginning playing music. And I could play my brother's music. I'm getting more comfortable with my identity being online, so maybe I can just play a tiny bit of music on my brother and show you his name.
That might be your Apple Jacket. Hello. Thank you. Jamie, would you like to have Apple Jacket or be there?
All right. You heard him answer the door. So he said hello. Yes, we live in an apartment, and he is answering the door to a delivery. Oh, damn it. I forgot to turn off location. But here we go. More and more of my identity is going online, which I was originally quite fearful about under Trump, because then it felt like the dark forces, not the dark, the totalitarian forces, the anti-democratic, nihilistic forces around the world were triumphing too much for people to know my name. Oh, particularly when I have kids and a husband. So this is my brother, and I didn't want to share his account before because you can see his surname. The Republicans that you know took the vaccine very quietly with no excitement that they received it, just told you that yes, they had it. Well, the good thing about that is it does speak to some kind of split in the Republican Party between people that openly embrace the lies about the vaccine, the lies about how important nationalism is, that migrants are a threat, and that everything is a zero-sum game in the world. If in order for some to win, some have to lose, and they want the migrants to lose because they anticipate that that will come at the expense of people born in the US. If you stop Trump's policies of being incredibly cruel to children and adults who seek to enter the US when fleeing from hunger and violence and climate change related agricultural collapse, etc. So the Republicans, you know, that took the vaccine very quietly, I'm guessing, Marsha, because of your intelligence and education, that the Republicans, you know, are probably college educated Republicans. And I think that speaks to a trajectory we might see more of, which is the erosion of educated support from the Republican Party, which isn't to say that there won't be a commensurate rise in non-college educated, low propensity voter support for the Republican Party. And by low propensity, I mean people who might not normally vote, but who feel emotionally validated by the Republicans Party pandering to lowest common denominator, zero-sum game theories. If you've lost, it's because the migrants are winning. If you've encountered financial harm, if you've gone bankrupt, if you've lost your business, migrants, Jews, Black people, Mexicans, whether or not they say it out loud, it definitely runs as a potent undercurrent to Tucker Carlson's nightly destructive rants on Fox, as well as Laura Ingraham and Sean Hannity. They're getting more and more overt, more and more explicit with the derogatory nature of their rhetoric. Marsha's on Long Island, and their children are Democrats, so they knew they would be coerced to go take it by their children. Okay, so living in an already blue state, they understood the social pressures that would result. Marsha notes that's true, Dav. There is a racist undercurrent even with the college educated. Yes. I learned this from Black people on Twitter who said even before Trump, they looked askance at people who voted Republican because they understood that that party coalesced around an agenda that was implicitly racist, even if it wasn't explicitly racist, and that's been in the works since not just Ronald Reagan, but there's definitely been a lot of behind the scenes racist organization. Since Ronald Reagan, there's been people belonging to the Council for National Policy, the CNP, collaborating with people in Russia over what they perceive to be shared conservative pro-family values, namely homophobic, white-centric values. And they wanted to promote that, so they overturned their previous anti-Russia position, and they understood that Putin wasn't a communist, that he was very much a pure, unrestrained, anti-guardrail capitalist who wanted to just purely profit from unrestrained industry that he himself would take a cut of. So it is estimated that Putin's the wealthiest man in the world because he hides his money, and a lot of that money is stolen from the people of Russia, whilst Putin continues to alternatively poison or slowly kill his leading political opponent, Alexei Navalny. So yes, the CNP has a lot of members whose names you might be familiar with. It's not talked about openly a lot, but Kellyanne Conway and that billionaire family, Robert Mercer and his daughter, Rebecca Mercer, and the Koch brothers, so including now just one surviving Koch brother. Those people have an agenda of trying to use pro-family values in the public to defeat more equitable pro-social policies in the Democratic Party upheld by the Democratic Party. So they trick people into voting for Republicans because they're pro-white heterosexual family units. So, did you drop something, darling? I forgive you. Was that one of Mummy's mugs? It's okay, baby. It's okay, darling. Are you okay? Daddy's handling it. It's all right. It's just something I could hear, like something porcelain smash. And the only thing I really care about is some of my mugs, which have sentimental value, but not even that sentimental. So the New York Times has a map of hesitant vaccine counties that reads like political polls. Yes, because identity directs action, and identity politics in the Republican Party means valuing loyalty to Trump over information. It means an increased likelihood of accepting the truth of what Tucker Carlson tells you, and he's very anti-vaccine. He's very, well, they won't tell you the truth about the vaccine, but I'm here to tell you the vaccine doesn't work, blah, blah, blah. And it's driven by some complicit Republican behavior on the part of politicians that actively intends to sabotage the economy, actively intends to sabotage the pandemic containment efforts, so that people have to be fearful, people have to stay indoors, people can't trust that enough of the public have been vaccinated to achieve that all-critical herd immunity status. Now, this is herd immunity achieved as a vaccination outcome, not as a we just let millions of people die until the disease had ravaged through the entire population and we just ran with what's left. But I should note that that is a form of Darwinistic thinking that's often adopted by white supremacists, who falsely believe that you can purify the human race by letting weak people die and never helping or sharing or doing anything pro-social, pro-safety net, that life should be this unrestrained, zero-sum competition. Daddy's in a different room, darling. Do you need help? Sweetie, what do you need? Why are you calling for Daddy? What do you need, darling? Do you want me to help you? I'm just going to help my son just for a second. Yeah, I'm coming. Yeah, I'm coming right now. What son's here?
What's up? Yeah, he was scared. He tried to, he tried to get one from there. Well, you can do that. Why didn't he just finish the book then?
All right. Yes, turns out my son has a little cut on his foot from dropping a plate. The mugs are safe, but my son is pressing a tissue to his foot. So I will go and we'll be motherly. I will play a little bit of my brother's music as a sign off. How are you feeling, Pumpkin?
Okay. Tissue stop the blood though.
That's good. Yeah, it just needs a little bit of pressure, I think.
So now does it? Can I have a band-aid?
I
You
don't
don't have a band-aid in the house.
Yeah, we ran out of band-aids. We need to get some.
We're not buying band-aids.
I'll go look in the cupboard in case I can dig up some. Thank you. He's all good. Yeah, everything's okay. He's got a tiny little scratch. Yeah, I do feel bad that we've run out of band-aids, but we might have some if I dig around in the cupboard. All right, everybody. Thank you, Christopher and Bob. Yes, all's good. He's going to do fine. He's already hobbled off back to the living room. It's not bleeding anymore. It's just a tiny cut. Thank you for your thoughts, everyone. Thank you, Marsha, Bob, Christopher, Sean, Craig. Is that everybody? Phil. And have I said Molly? Molly. So thank you to all my regular listeners and to anybody new who's tuned in today. Thank you. Let me just say thank you to my patrons as well. If they watch the replay, I've been realizing that I do have these patrons who've been so kind and loyal that I should check. No. Oh, maybe I can't see their names here, but I can say thank you. Alan, Sheldon, John, Aaron, Phil, Clark, Mark, Drew, Christopher, Bob and Holly, Clayton, Elizabeth. Thank you so much, everybody. Bye, everybody. Take care. Oh, thanks, Marsha. Bye, everyone. Have a wonderful evening and a good rest. Till we meet again. Oh, wait. All this time I thought I was. Oh no, maybe the music was playing. Okay, good. Marsha says, "Got talent." I'm guessing that's for my brother. And the appreciate, or maybe it's for me too. And the appreciate award. Thank you so much, Marsha. Much appreciated.